At this time, when we celebrate Ziggerblood, the victory of the springtime over the winter, let me tell you a tale of how the gods once became old, for they had lost that which gave them their vigor and their strength and their immortality. What was this, you may well ask? Well, apples, my friends, apples. For the goddess Idunn, wife of Bragi, god of poetry, held in a small chest that she always carried with her great apples, which when eaten would restore the gods to their youthfulness and their vitality. And whenever they were feeling old, they would always seek out Idunn. Now, one day, Odin, Loki, and Hona had gone on a journey into Midgard, and they had walked far, and they were beginning to feel hungry. So they set up their camp for the night, overlooking a field where oxen were feeding, and they killed 2 of these great oxen, butchered them, and prepared them for the feast. The fire was lit, the pot was filled, and the meat was placed inside the pot to boil. But after a while, when they opened the pot, it was still cold. It had not cooked. So they decided to leave it for a bit longer. And again, they opened up the pot, still cold. And then, from a tree nearby, they heard laughter. And they looked about, and they saw a huge eagle sitting in one of the trees. And he said, "Well, it would appear that your food is not cooked and you go hungry." "Yes," said the gods, "that is true. Can you help us?" "I can," said the eagle, "for I have placed a magic upon your food, so it will not cook. But if you give me a share of your food, I will release that, and it will cook immediately." So the gods, of course, by now were hungry, and they agreed to the eagle's demands. And when the food was boiled and they'd laid it out, the eagle swooped down, and he took 2 great haunches of the oxen and 2 shoulders, and he flew away into the tree to eat them. Now, once he had eaten these, he came back for more, and Loki, furious by this point that they had not had theirs, struck out at the eagle with his staff. Now, one end of Loki's staff stuck fast to the eagle. The other was stuck fast in Loki's grip, and he could not release. Now the eagle began to fly over trees, over rocks, over boulders, and Loki was bounced around and dashed against these rocks and began to cry out in pain. And he pleaded to the eagle for him to stop and to free him. And the eagle said, "No, I will not do such a thing, not unless you bring to me what I desire." I will do anything you say," said Loki. Anything, please, just let me go." So the eagle said, "Well, for me to release you, you must bring me Idunn and the apples that she carries in that chest." "Yes, yeah, I will do that, said Loki, "but please, just release me." So the eagle, having got agreement to get what he wanted, released Loki. Loki tumbled to the ground, stood up and walked back, in some pain, back to his companions. "Ah, Loki," they said, "come, eat, eat." But Loki had lost his appetite, and Odin and Hona put this down to the fact that he was shaken up by his flight with the eagle. After they had eaten, they made their way back to Asgard. Now the time came when the giants' agreement was to be fulfilled. And Idunn one day was walking through the courtyards of Asgard, and she was greeting the gods, and she was seeing if there was any sign of old age or weakness upon them, that they may require one of her apples to restore their vitality. But they were all looking well. And then she saw Loki coming towards her, and he said, "Ah, Idunn, I fear old age is upon me and I grow weak. I would dearly, dearly like a taste of one of your apples today to restore me." "Loki," said Idunn, "you do not look old, you do not look weak." "Ah," he said, "but my back, Idunn, my back aches today. It aches so much. I need one of your apples." So Idunn, believing him, offered him one from the chest, and he bit into it, and a look of disapproval came over his face, and he said, "You know, Idunn, these apples are good, but I have seen a tree out in the woods beyond Asgard's walls that stands upon a hill, a fine apple tree. I am sure the apples on those trees are better than the ones you have in your chest." "Oh, Loki," she said, "surely you do not think so. These are the apples of immortality, Loki." I know," he said, "but I'm sure that those apples on that tree would taste better than your ones in this chest." I know," he said, "why do we not put it to the test?" "How do you mean?" she said. "Well, why do you not come with me one day? Bring your apples, and I will take you to the apple tree, and we can compare to see which ones taste the better." "Yes, Loki," she said, "I will do that. For I do not believe there are any apples in the world that are better than these ones I carry." So the day came, and Idunn walked out from the gates of Asgard with Loki. And they walked through the forest, up to the hill. Now as they were walking up, Idunn began to feel that something was wrong. And she said, "Loki, why is there a great eagle in one of these trees? What is he doing here? What is his purpose?" "I do not know," said Loki. "I am sure he means no harm. Let us carry on." So they carried on to the tree, and as they reached the tree, the great eagle swooped down, and he clutched Idunn in great talons, being careful to pick up the chest as well. And as he carried Idunn off, he cried, "I am no eagle, but I am the giant Thiassi. And now I take the apples of immortality back to Thrymheim in Jotunheim, where I will grow strong, and I will maintain my vigor forevermore, and the gods of Asgard will grow old and grey and weak, and when the time comes, we will come for them." Now Loki made his way back to Asgard. At first, Idunn's disappearance was not really felt by the gods, but after a while, they began to feel old. Odin and Heimdall renowned for their vision, began to be able to see far less. Odin's one eye grew misty. Heimdall, who could see 100 miles in all directions, began to be able to only see half of that. Thor, most powerful of the gods, began to struggle to lift Mjolnir without the aid of Megingjord, his great belt that he wore. And the goddesses, they felt it most keenly, for lines began to appear on their faces. Their hair grew grey and white, and their beauty began to fade. Now, a great council was held, and the gods discussed between them what could have happened to Idunn and where she had last been seen. And it transpired that the last person that she had been seen with was Loki. Now, Loki was seized and he was brought in front of the council. And he was told that unless he bring Idunn back from wherever she was, his death would be slow and very, very painful. He was told that the fires were being heated at that very moment. An iron was being made red hot, ready for Loki. Now, in fear of his life, Loki said, yes, I will bring Idunn back. But, he said, I will need Freya's raven cloak. My cloak? Said Freya. Well, if needs must. So she went to fetch the cloak. Loki put it on, transformed himself into a falcon, and he flew out from Asgard, deep into Jotunheim. Eventually he came to Thiassi's halls. There in a great watchtower was a room at the top where Thiassi had placed Idunn. Now on this day, Thiassi had gone out fishing and he had taken his great boat with him. And Loki alighted on the window and went into the room. He transformed himself back into himself, and there he saw Idunn kneeling on the floor crying to herself. And he said, Idunn, he said, I have come to rescue you, to bring you back to Asgard. And Idunn, looking up at Loki, and her eyes blazed with anger, and she said, rescue me. It was you, Loki, you who got me into this in the first place. If you hadn't have coaxed me into that wood, into that forest, Thiassi would never have been able to abduct me and bring me here. I know, I know, said Loki, and I have come to right that. That was yesterday's Loki. Today's Loki is a new man. I have learned from my mistakes. And with that, he transformed Idunn into a tiny hazelnut and himself back into the falcon. He grasped Idunn gently in his talons and flew out from the window and headed back to Asgard. Now when Thiassi came back from his fishing trip, he went to court Idunn, but he found when he went to the rooms that she was gone. But then he saw on the floor one falcon feather, and he knew exactly what had happened. So he transformed himself back into the eagle, this time more magnificent than before. and he set off after Loki. Now Loki flew harder and faster than he had ever had to fly before, for his life and Idunn's was in danger. And luckily for him, the walls of Asgard came into view. And at the base of these walls, the gods had piled wood and shavings ready for his return. And as Loki crossed the walls, the gods set a fire, and it rose up into the sky, filling it with flame. And Thiassi, with a great cry, flew straight into those flames. His feathers charred and burned, and he fell from the sky to the ground outside the walls of Asgard. And there Thor, even though he was old and weak, Thor stepped up with Mjolnir, and he dealt a blow that ended Thiassi's life. Now, Idunn was welcomed back into the court of Asgard, and the gods ate of her apples, and they began to feel their strength and their vigor flow back into them. Thor, his hair returned to the flaming red, his strength recovered, was able to begin his defense of Asgard against the trolls and the giants once more. Heimdall, who guarded Bifrost, was able to see to the full distance he could once more again, and was able to keep a far better watch over the gods than before. Odin's great sight was restored, and the goddesses, the lines vanished from their faces, their hair returned to the colour of spun gold, and their youthful beauty returned. And the gods once more reigned in Asgard as before.